Warning, the global economy is quickly unraveling. Hey guys, Britt here. Welcome to End Times Bible Prophecy. Now, we've talked a number of times about the headwinds economically that the world's biggest economies are facing, but now we have a trade war featuring, tariffs and reciprocal tariffs that threatens to make the global depression even worse. So today we're going to talk about what's actually happening on the ground, what it means for you, and how you can prepare for what the impacts of all of this may be. But first, I want to turn your attention to this right here. So this is from brittgillette.substack.com. This is an article that went out yesterday. If you missed it, I'll pin a link at the top of the comments. Highly recommend checking this out. This is part one of a three-part series. God willing, next week I'll do part two, and the week after part three. But this is about the end times financial system they want to trap the world into. And part one is about central bank digital currencies. Hopefully, again, God willing, we'll talk about tokenized assets and digital IDs in the weeks ahead. But this is an important article because it discusses what all of this is, what's happening right now, what is the status of the rollout of some of these things, and then, of course, how they're going to sell all of this to the world. And so this is important to understand because there are a number of people that don't even know what central bank digital currency is, much less what, even among those who do know what it is, many people don't understand what the repercussions of that are and what it means. So this is a good article you can share with friends and family that hopefully will educate people. The more educated people are, the more we can push back against this, hopefully delay the rollout of this. I don't know. But either way, we need to be prepared. We need to be spiritually prepared for the times ahead and what we're going to face. So back to what we're talking about, global trade and the impact on the economy. The global economy is unraveling. Global supply chains are unraveling as we speak. We've already talked about China and a deflationary spiral. We've seen Germany, the world's third largest economy, has seen industrial production in complete decline since the Russia-Ukraine war. We're seeing first quarter negative growth projected for the United States. And we've talked about all the issues that the Japanese economy faces as the fourth largest economy. So we've got the four largest economies in the world facing major problems. And now on top of that, we have this trade war taking place. And we're starting to see data from that. We're starting to see stories about what this actually means. So that's what we're going to discuss today, starting with this right here. So this is a tweet from Arnaud Bertrand. He says, overall, U.S. imports at negative 64% has got to be one of the most insane numbers in economic history. I don't think people quite comprehend how disruptive that's going to be. And here we have overall U.S. imports, so goods imported into the United States, the first week of April versus the last week of March, down 64%. Now, that's bad, but let's temper those numbers with the knowledge that companies understood tariffs were coming and did what's called front running. They imported more than they otherwise would have in anticipation of the tariffs. So that's going to affect that number. We'll see what these numbers are in the weeks and months ahead. But if we continue to see these negative numbers for months to come, that is dire news for the global economy. And so we really want to keep an eye on these numbers. We have this story right here from Daniel Lacal. It says, container orders plummet, trade deals now, or economic depression soon. And I agree. I think we're in an economic depression. I think it makes it worse unless these issues get sorted out in short order. Because with each passing day, this is putting more and more pressure on companies all around the world. And the global economy is a global issue. It's not set on specific nations. Nations aren't isolated from one another to the degree they were decades ago or centuries ago. So it says global container booking volumes fell by 49% between the last week of March and the first week of April, according to FreightWaves. Again, temper that with knowing that companies were front-running the tariffs. Imports from China to the United States collapsed by 64%, with imports of apparel and textiles declining by a whopping 59% and 57% respectively. The figures coming from shipping companies are worse than those seen during the COVID-19 crisis. These alarming figures suggest that importers are unwilling to accept higher prices in the middle of a tariff war, that exporters cannot simply choose to move their products elsewhere easily, that's true, and that the excess capacity in many sectors is much larger than initially expected. No one wants to accept the cost of tariffs, and this means that the only option for the economies with elevated productive overcapacity is to negotiate a trade deal and quickly, or face an economic depression. The mainstream view about tariffs was that United States consumers would pay the entire negative impact, and we've stated that is not the case. This news suggests otherwise. The purchasing power of importers is higher than expected. The number of order cancellations is so large that ports in China have had to take emergency measures to address the challenges created by piles of unsold containers. The negative impact is enormous on ports as fees plummet, but we cannot forget the dramatic effect on producers with excess capacity. Many global exporters are going to face bankruptcy if no trade deal is reached due to insufficient working capital. In the European Union, leaders are concerned that the trade war between the United States and China will bring a flood of cheap products from China that could endanger local producers and create a significant economic problem. Many exporters are facing a harsh reality. They cannot sell their products if they don't export them to the United States. And the importers are not going to accept higher prices due to tariffs. The reason why exporters cannot pass the cost of tariffs to United States consumers is because most of the products they delivered to America were only attractive because they were exceedingly cheap. When prices rise, demand decreases significantly. The tariff war has shown that demand is not elastic. And guys, this is a key point that the mainstream corporate media has been missing, that we've been pointing out when they've said, tariffs bring inflation, tariffs bring inflation. And yes, in a vacuum, if you add an extra cost, an added import cost onto a product, that's going to be passed along to the consumer one way or another, in total or partially. But that's assuming the consumer buys the product. And that's what we've been pointing out. This is not inflationary, what we're seeing. This is deflationary. Because what cannot be bought won't. And most U.S. consumers are simply tapped out. With the inflation we've seen over the last 5 years and debt levels at historical levels, we aren't seeing incomes rise at a rate that keeps pace with all of that. And so if you raise the price of something, it's going to lower the demand. And that is deflationary. That means that on products that aren't essential to life, the prices will go down if you've got an abundance of supply and demand is not enough to at current prices to eat up that supply. Those prices are going to drop. Those factories are going to slow their production or shut down altogether. And those workers get laid off. All of that is deflationary. And we're going to see these effects throughout the global economy in the United States and China and Europe, everywhere. And so we're also seeing things like this. So this is from Zero Hedge. It says Chinese plastics factories face mass closure as U.S. ethane supply evaporates. It says Bloomberg reports Chinese plastics factories that depend on a gas they mainly import from the United States are contending with the prospect of widespread shutdowns as the world's two largest economies bunker down for a prolonged trade war. The world's dominant plastics manufacturer gets almost all its ethane, a petrochemical feedstock that is also a component of natural gas, from the United States. But eye-watering tariffs on American goods mean plants that cannot produce substitute raw materials will bleed money. Their only alternative is to mothball production for the near or not so near future. And again, China is the world's second largest economy. We've done a number of videos on how they are locked in a deflationary spiral already. For those that don't know, a deflationary spiral is what we saw during the Great Depression. We see an abundance of overcapacity within that economy already. And now we're going to see more as they shut down production of these key components. But it's more than just an economic slowdown. We live in a world of just-in-time delivery and a supply chain, a global supply chain that's built for efficiency. It was maximized for efficiency. We've seen a little bit of resilience built into that post-pandemic shutdown when people realized what that meant and the fragility of that global supply chain. But not to the degree that there's an abundance of inventory being built up. No. What we're going to see from this is all sorts of second, third, and fourth order effects that most people haven't thought of, that people can't think of because it's so complex. The system is so complex, created by the free market, that no one person can really understand it. And so we see when these policies are put in place, the impact it's going to have here. Well, if these plastics can't be created, what does that mean? That may mean that whole products can't reach the shelves because maybe you make the product, but it comes in some sort of plastic packaging that no longer will be available. We don't know. We're going to find out in the weeks and months ahead, the longer this goes on. But I would anticipate that we're going to see some missing items, some supply chain issues, maybe not to the degree of COVID pandemic shutdowns quite yet. But this is what this means for all of us who are paying attention to this, who are watching this. If this lingers on, if this continues on, it's going to create massive supply chain issues as well as an economic depression. So let's take a look at this from the New York Post. This is another example of why. So in retaliation, China suspended rare earth exports, kneecapping U.S. industry reliant on Beijing's monopoly. It says China has stopped shipping some heavy rare earth metals and magnets critical to U.S. production of everything from cell phones to fighter jets as Beijing's trade war with Washington simmers, leaving American industry in a bind. Effective April 3rd, China is no longer exporting 7 heavy rare earth metals produced exclusively in China, as well as heavy rare earth magnets, of which about 90% of the world's supply are also synthesized on Beijing's territory. The export halt applies to all countries, but access to some of these key elements, like dysprosium and yttrium, is critical to U.S. industry, especially in the tech, electric vehicle, aircraft, and defense sectors, according to Drew Horn, who served as the top U.S. official on strategic minerals and energy supply chain development in President Trump's first administration. Quote, rare earths are in everything, he told the Post Monday, signaling out the EV and auto space and everything from cell phones, defense key components, and space travel. China, Horn added, has essentially created an all-powerful monopoly with them. And this goes on to talk about the implications of all of that. So guys, keep in mind, rare earths are not necessarily rare, even though that's in the name. And they're not all located in China. The problem is that, facilities could be built almost anywhere, and in the United States could create the rare earths that it needs, but it does not have currently the facilities in place to mine and to process those rare earth elements. All of that has moved into China for various reasons, most of them regulatory in nature, regulatory policies in countries all around the world, including the United States. It has made China the low-cost producer, so all 90% of that production has moved into China. The problem is these things are critical components in the global supply chain, and China cutting them off means, well, anything that uses those will no longer be able to be made once the current inventory of those key components runs out. So the longer this goes on, the more of an issue we have. And if you read the rest of this article, they go on and they state, well, given subsidies or, full bore effort, we can have these facilities in the United States by 2026. But what happens in the interim to the global supply chain, to the global economy? And that's assuming that all the red tape was cut and these facilities moved forward, that companies are willing to invest that time and energy knowing that a new administration could come into power in 4 years, reverse all of these policies, or even the Trump administration itself could reverse these policies, no longer make it economically viable for those facilities to continue to exist. So this is what we talked about in the past with the uncertainty that is created by changing these policies so abruptly. And so a lot of businesses are sitting around and they're waiting to see where all of this goes. So the longer it takes for a resolution to this trade war, the more issues it's going to create economically, but also from a supply chain standpoint. So again, we could see all of this resolved tomorrow. I don't anticipate that that's the case. But if we did, that would be helpful. The longer this goes on, the worse it makes the global depression. And guys, the longer this goes on, the worse the supply chain impacts are going to be. I anticipate we're going to see those, even if all of this was resolved right now. We're going to see some sort of supply chain disruptions 2-3 weeks down the road at some point in time. But the longer this goes on, the worse those are going to become. So I would prepare accordingly. If there are critical tools or equipment or anything that you may need, if you need laptop computers or cell phones or anything like that, I would go ahead and get those now. Just as we talked about, well, those trade figures are probably off because companies were front-running the tariffs. They were importing more than they had to ahead of time in order to prepare for the tariffs they knew were coming. We should also, as individuals, be looking ahead to what are you going to need 3 months from now, 6 months from now? Are you able to get it now? If you are able to get it now, it's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and get it now, because it may be unavailable at any price 6 months from now. I don't know. Again, I don't anticipate that's going to be for things like food, but it could be the case for basically anything that has electronic components in it, anything that's relying on the complex global supply chain. If it's critical to you, I would go ahead and get it now. So, as that's what we see heading on the ground right now in the data. As we see, this is having major ripple effects throughout the global economy. We're seeing the global economy, I believe, unraveling. Next, I think we're going to see the markets begin to unravel, because as we talked about in a video 2-3 weeks ago, the announcement of these tariffs was an earthquake that is triggering a tsunami. That tsunami has yet to hit, but I believe that it will hit. It will be in Japan, and it will be the reversal of the yen carry trade. And frankly, the reversal of a number of these carry trades in the financial markets. They're going to hit the global financial markets in a major way. And all of this leads to, I believe, the greatest economic and financial crisis in the history of the world. And they're going to start rolling out things like central bank digital currency, tokenized assets, and digital IDs as their solution. Guys, while all of that is not the mark of the beast, because we are not in the tribulation, it sets the stage for that. Puts things in place that are indistinguishable in capability and function from the mark of the beast system. All of that will be put in place. They're telling us they want to do that. It's not a conspiracy theory. They're doing it. In some places, they've already done it. In other places, they're telling us it's rolling out soon. An economic crisis gives them the impetus to push it into completion and final adoption. So we want to be pushing back against that, and we need to be being prepared spiritually. Most important thing you can do is to make sure you know Jesus Christ. So guys, let me know what you think. Leave your comments below. And God willing, I'll see you on Friday.